Sorry. Hello, today I'm going to do a short demonstration on how to create a DLL in C#.NET to take data from an Excel spreadsheet and push it into an SQL database. I found Excel to be an awesome product, but it is very slow and inefficient at uploading data in bulk to an SQL database. So what I'm going to show you today is one of the solutions that I have found that made the user experience better. First, we're going to have a look at the Excel spreadsheet, and we're going to switch on the developer tab, and we're going to add a reference and a module, and then the spreadsheet is ready to go for when we get the DLL created, and then you can see the data move. Excel doesn't matter. It'll work in most versions, in fact, all versions. What I have found is that the VBA code that's behind Excel is very like Visual Basic 6, and because of that, it won't allow you to use the .NET world. So this DLL that I'm going to create will allow us to bridge over from the world of VB6 and go into the world of .NET, where we can use some different tricks to move data. My data has about 1,000 records. It has a key field in column A, then some data, and this is what we want to push into the database. Now, the thing to remember here is that the data in the tab will be exactly the same as what's in the table that will end up in the database. So if you remove a record from here, it'll remove the record from the table in the database. And vice versa, if you add some records, it'll put them in and update records as it sees fit. First thing I want to do is to make sure that you have the developer tab switched on. And to do that, you go into File, Options, Customize ribbon, and if you look down the list on the right hand side, you should see the developer tab. If it's not switched on, click the tick and that will switch it on. Then I want you to click on the basic tab, sorry, the basic button, right mouse click, insert a module. In the properties for that module, all I'm going to do is to label it up something simple like mod code. You can call it what you want, but that's all we need for the moment. I'm now going to add an initial reference, and this reference is part of MDAC, which is the Microsoft ActiveX data objects. Choose the latest one that you have available, and if you don't have it in this list, you need to go and download it from one of Microsoft website and get it installed. Over the years, I have played with horse racing data to try and work out which is the winning horse, and that's where my data is coming from. I have a collection of 642,000 races, which I use to analyze and try and work out ways of seeing which horse is going to win. We have the script that will create us a table. This is not a demonstration on how to write code. It is just basically a quick run through of what you need to do to make it work. We're creating a table. This is the table script. And we're doing nothing more exciting than just running that in. I haven't done any indexes. Indexes will improve performance greatly, but that's not part of this demonstration. We're going to create what's called a table type, and this is the bit where we get the most speed benefit in this end-to-end process. It's a slightly different declaration to a table, where it says it's a type, and it says it's as a table. And this is what's going to suck in the data from our DLL. Stored procedure is quite a simple stored procedure and has three parts to it, which I shall now explain to you. The first bit to remember before we get to the parts is it's in taking a parameter of TBL, and it is of table type, what we've just created in the other script. Now, the idea is the data that we then put into a data table that's in .NET gets pushed into this variable, and then SQL then runs these three parts and works out what needs to be inserted, what's deleted, and what's just updated. The first thing is we delete any records in our SQL table where we can't find the race ID in the what we've sent in. Next part is to insert into our SQL table any records that we don't have already in our SQL table. And the final part is to see if there's any records that need updating, and it will do that on the fly. And it uses a little where clause here where it checks to see if any of the values are different, and if any of them, those values are different, it will then carry out the update. We've all got red squigglies because the table's just been created. If we came off the system and went back on, you'll find that these would all work. Now, as a future project, there's times where I've needed to add to the table in the database and not always remove records. So there's some extra rules that you can implement which make sure that it doesn't delete too many records and it doesn't insert too many records, and it keeps the data in the table growing over time. Now we're going to create a new Visual Studio project. What we've got to do is something a little different. We have to run it as the administrator. Because we're going to create a COM DLL, we need to run it as administrator so it can be registered. If you don't have rights to do that on your machines, which can happen when you're in a work environment, you need to get in touch with your IT department to help you out on that. We'll create a new project. And we're going to look down our list. We're looking for a C# Windows library, and the one we're looking for is the class library.net framework, and then we're going to hit next. I'm going to call the project Excel to SQL, and it's going to be in my repos folder, and we're going to use .NET Framework 4.7.2 in this instance. You can use older ones, that should work fine. It's just that's what's installed on this machine. Hit create, and we should end up with Visual Studio open, which we do indeed. I'm going to change the name of the class because I don't like it saying class 1, and I'm just going to call it CLS Excel to SQL, and rename everything that's going. We're going to change some bits and pieces in here, but we'll leave them for the moment. We're going to right mouse click, and we're going to go into properties, and then we're going to go down to the first bit we're going to go to is assembly information, and in there we're going to make assembly COM visible. We've switched that on. Then we need to look down the other sections, and I need to find this one here which says register for COM interop as well. We switch then to on, and that's what we need to do there. We also need to go into right mouse click on the project and then do add and then do a reference, and what we need to do is to go and find exactly the same reference that we installed in Excel, or we attached in Excel, which is Microsoft ActiveX Data Object 6.1, and then hit OK. This isn't, as I said, this isn't an example of how to write code. This is just going to show you how to make it all work and explain the logic and the thoughts that are behind it. So I'm just going to paste this into here. Paste it into here. So what we have is our class. We've got a namespace which is Excel to SQL, which you'll see later on. We need to add this reference, this line of code here on line 14, which helps it helps Excel see what's inside the DLL. We're calling our class DB utility. It's got a constructor which doesn't have anything to do with it, so it's just a blank one, just so we can hang on to it. And then we get to the important bit, which is the actual method that will do the uploading. It's simply called upload. It will return a string, which will either be the number of records or it will be the error message that it has. It takes in a connection string. So what is the name of the database, or the connection string to get to the database, the stored procedure that's going to do the uploading, and then the actual data. These 3 lines of code here will take the record set that comes in as the parameter and pushes it into a table that's within a data set, which is within a data adapter. Here we pull out the data table, and I push it into a variable called DT. And that's what I'm going to use later on. It initializes the return flag, or the return variable, with the record count if it has them. If something's gone wrong, it'll bail out and tell you what the error message is in, because there's an error check further down. We do a try, and we set up our connection to the server, and that is what's done here using the using command. Then we use a command that will then set up for the stored procedure that we're going to use. We tell the command what type it's going to be, and it says here it is the stored procedure, and then we push in the connection that we've set up further up the chain. We have one parameter to push in, and it's going to be the data in the data table, and it goes into our variable @tbl. Now, if you remember in SQL on our stored procedure, that there is our variable that we're going to use. Then we open a connection, and then here it does the work to do the actual upload, closes the connection, and then it will return the value of how many records it had, or it will return the error that it found. And that's as simple as that is. That's all it does. So now we're going to do the build, and hopefully it'll come down here and say 1 has succeeded, so all is good. So what I do now is I go and get the actual DLL, the PDP, and the TLB file. Now this is the really important part, which is what Excel hangs on to then attach this DLL as a reference. So I'm going to copy them, and I'm going to put them in a temporary folder that's on my drive C. For no other reason, normally the DLLs go into the system32 folder and it will sit there happily fine. But because I'm wanting to show you the registration process, I thought it would be easier if I just keep it out the way so you can see. What I also need, and what I've done to make life a bit easier for the demonstration and when I actually do this for real, is I've created 2 command files which I can run, and they register the DLL and they deregister the DLL as I work through my what's going on. So if we go into here and click edit, what we have on the first part, it goes and finds whatever the framework that it's got, the executable reg ASM. We're going to push in excel to sql.dll, which is the name of our DLL there, /codebase, /tbl, and /verbose is just so we get some information on the screen back. So if I right mouse click and run as administrator, as before, if you're doing it on a work machine, you may need IT's help. And what we should have in all this is this line here, which basically says it's been successfully registered. Because I haven't signed the DLL, it's given this error up here, but for the demo purposes, it's worked and it's installed. The Visual Studio goes, we've now finished that. So now I shall close that down and minimize that out of the way. If we go back to here, just as a quick, I have nothing up my sleeve. If we take the name of our table, which is that, and say select star from there, we should find we've got a table but no records. Things to remember here. I need you to remember that we're going to go from column A to column I. That will become clear why shortly. Go into here, we're going to add in tools, and we go into references, and we now need to go and find the DLL that we've just created, which, if I know my alphabet, should be down here, and there it is, Excel to SQL. We hit OK. So now we've got our DLL hooked up to Excel, so the connections are nearly there. These files I'm going to put onto GitHub, and they'll be available for people to download whenever they are ready. If I copy all them and go into here, paste into this is into the module that we created earlier on. Now the first part of we have a public procedure called run. And what this simply does is it takes a note of the now time, because we're going to see how long things take. It takes the data, which currently here it's A to C, but I need to change that to A to I, and that's telling it what the name of the sheet is where I want the data, what's the starting column, what's the end column, and does it have any headers. That store procedure, that procedure is just a bit further down, which I will show you in a moment. We then set up a link to our database. Now this is an old demonstration, so what should be able to happen is if I put in there Excel to SQL and hit dot, we get DB utility, which is correct. I then change this one to say exactly the same, Excel to SQL dot DB utility, and that's using the constructor, dummy constructor that was within it. I have created a function that pushes in the connection string I need, which I will come to at the moment, but basically I'll do is I'm requesting whatever's in here and it pushes it into a variable called CS. I then say, let's have my return string of what I'm going to get back, whatever the values are. Now, one of the game changes in this whole process was where I found a way of taking the data from a tab and changing it into an XML, so changing it into XML data, and then from that XML data, it pushes it into an ADO record set. And once I get it into a record set, it puts us in a different world where we can then pass that record set through to our DLL, and then it'll do the uploading. With all this in mind, all added, we should, if we step through, just for first time run, we'll just see what actually happens. See if it does all the connecting, or whether see we've passed back there. If we hover over return, it says it could not find the stored procedure upload Dave, because that's quite correct, because we've called it the wrong name. What we need to do is go back to our here, and we go back and get our name of our stored procedure, which is that. To run that again. So I will cut those bits out so you don't actually see them. We'll go to return. It says we've got 1120 records. And it says it took 7 seconds. So now if we run this without any hand holding, and we go back to the front end, to run a macro, you go up to the developer tab, into macros. It's got our macro there called run. We hit run. So it took 0 seconds to run or load up 1,000 records. So if we go onto here, we do execute, we now have 1120 records, which matches. And now just to show things kind of working, if we go do that, we'll truncate it, which deletes all the records. Now look at it again, it's blank. Go back onto our Excel spreadsheet, macros, run, fraction of a second to sort it out. Now if we go back into SQL and do another select, there's the data. Now, so that's the demonstration from start to finish. Now where we're winning on time is we're going into the world of .NET, which is using newer drivers, and it's a newer world and it's a better way of working. We are converting our data that's in a tab into XML, which then gets converted into a record set. Once it's in a record set, it allows us to then pass that record set through to the DLL. The DLL changes it to a data table, and the data table is allowed to be passed to SQL database using a table type. Now, the table type is another part where the process gets its speed increases. And you end up having a really good world of good user experience, and they aren't waiting for as long as they could do to upload the data. Key things to take away is, in this example, we needed data where it had a key, and the stored procedure will then work out what it needs to add and remove based on that key. You need the assumption that whatever is in the spreadsheet on that tab is got to be exactly the same as whatever is in the database. And you need to employ different tricks if you want to make it bigger and add to the database all the time and have different business logic. This is purely a demonstration that moves the data from Excel to SQL through a DLL as quick as possible. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments, and if you have any other ideas, let me know and we'll see what we can do about them. Thanks for watching.